Hey guys, Kelade here, coming at you with a slightly different game and guide today. I have been playing a lot of New World since its launch. Don't worry, I'm still playing WoW, but just not that much new content there at the moment. But the bow is a weapon that I don't think has been super meta when the game has first come out for New World, right? There's been a lot of mages, a lot of great axes, and of course there's always life staffs, right? You're always going to need that for the healing. But I think especially with the recent changes to Resilient, to where it no longer reduces all damage. Now it only reduces critical hits, like the way that it says. I think a lot more people are looking to see strength of bow, and a lot of people are more interested, as I think people that play the bow just get better at it. It is a higher skill cap because you realistically want to be hitting headshots with your bow and your muskets, right? So as people get better at that, the damage numbers of these are going to go up, and you're probably going to see more people play it, especially if people figure out what they should be doing. And I think that's the biggest thing, is I want to talk about mainly focus on gameplay, how to actually take advantage of the bow in this guide, and also I actually include a short video at the end where we have a really quick war, but it'll give you some good insight into how you should be playing the bow in a real environment. And this video is going to mainly focus on just the PvP aspect, especially wars, with a little bit of Outpost rush, and overall it's still going to be really good for invasions too, because in the invasion setting you're in the same zone as you would be for a war. And thrust damage, which is the bow, which is most of the main dexterity things that you have, are really good for corruption. So you're likely going to be the highest DPS in an invasion too, if you're using the bow. But quickly, let's get into it. So the first thing is your weapons, right? So of course, the most important weapon for the bow is you got to have the bow itself. Bow only scales off of dexterity, so you're just going to want dexterity on the bow. Not a huge deal if it has constitution, but we can get into those two stats in a second here. But yeah, this is my current bow. I have another bow that I use. This is the quest one, the torrent one, the 581. When you get your weapon level to be 20, you get a quest for all the weapons, right? The reason why this one is important is because this one gives plus damage to corrupted. Every single weapon does, actually, when you do the 580 quest. So I use that one for invasions, and then for everything else for PvP, I'm using this one. The key stats that you're looking for outside of just dexterity is, of course, you want it to have a socket. Right now I'm using the diamond gem, the rally 4 version, the 15 plus damage and outgoing healing when at full health. Realistically, as a bow, you're really going to be playing in the back line, and you shouldn't be taking damage. And if your damage is not full, pop a health pot. It's really that simple. You want to stay at 100% health so you get the damage buff the entire time, and you really shouldn't be getting hit. If people are coming at you, you're running away. That's really how you should be playing it, especially in a larger war setting. You're going to be very, very squishy, but you're going to do a lot of damage. The other thing is, a lot of times, especially right now, how you're going to get into groups as a bow is probably going to be due to a lot of siege damage. I do think bow definitely does more damage than musket at the moment, and it's going to be one of the best weapons to destroy siege. So one of the good perks that you really want a bow is siege damage. I think it's the meta game for siege is always changing currently in New World. I think in the beginning, a lot of people use repeaters, and then there's more people using the AoE kind of bombs. And there's also people who've been using war horns. But regardless of whatever they're using, rune is, right, it's going to be buffing the damage you deal with the weapon to whatever siege, right? It doesn't mean that, like, if you sit in the siege with weapon, you're going to do more damage. It's you're hitting the siege weapons with your bows. And of course, makes it very easy to hit, right? Because if the siege weapon is there, or even the gates, they're never going to move. So you're going to hit all of your bow shots. Well, hopefully you hit all of them. And then there's a couple of other traits that are all good. I can just kind of list them all right here. The Warple, of course, headshot critical damage, great. The goal with your bow is just going to be to hit headshots. The more headshots you do, more guaranteed crits, and then Warple just helps increase that damage. And on top of that, if you can, then you can also get vicious. Enchanted could be an okay trait because it's just overall flat damage buff. Unfortunately, there isn't a crazy amount of good skill perks for bow that also increase user damage. The only one that's really worth it is going to be the rapid fire perk for penetrating rapid shot. It does give you a little bit more damage on the third shot, but that's really it. It's not super important to have actually on your bow. You can't get that perk on your other armor pieces, so if you can get it there, great. And then there's also just keenly empowered, which, if you hit a headshot, you're going to crit. So you're going to get a little bit empowered off of that too. So those are kind of the ones that you want to go for, but realistically, I think for now, the most important one is probably Runinous and Warple. But of course, you got to actually hit your shots. And as far as for arrows, you always want to be using the best arrows, so orichalcum arrows, straight up. Like if you're doing anything that's like actual important content, you should definitely be using the orichalcum arrows here, right? Increases your damage by 20%. What you can also do is, if you're in a war or invasion, and you can buy the Azoth arrows, those are the same thing. They're also a 1.2 damage modifier, so use that. If you're a little bit low on gold, you can of course go for star metal. But if you're actually doing like content you want to really win on, especially like wars, you definitely want to be using one of these two arrows. I just use iron arrows for when I farm and stuff. The other thing is when you're actually in an outpost rush, it doesn't consume your arrows. So you can actually just equip like a couple of orichalcum arrows and just use them the entire time. Now, of course, this is New World. There's a lot of bugs and a lot of issues with the game. So generally what I do see happens occasionally, for some reason, it will use an arrow here and there. In general, like every outpost rush, the game will just randomly use somewhere between like 0 to 10 arrows, even though it's not supposed to use any. So just keep that in mind. It does benefit. So like whatever arrow you put in here, even though outpost rush is not supposed to use your arrows, it will get the damage modifier. So you definitely want to be always having an orichalcum arrow in your arrow slot in an outpost rush, 100%. All right, the other weapon I just think should be Rapier. And the only reason you need Rapier is for this ability. That's really it. And of course you can also riposte and reflect the damage. But Rapier is there just to support bow. I'm here to tell you how to play bow. I'm not here to tell you about any other weapons, not Rapier, not spear. We're here focusing on bow. The only thing you're going to do for the Rapier is use that dash ability. That's it. Going into your rest of your gear really quickly. Yes, the PvP gear has been nerfed, but I'm gonna make this guy just talking about this gear because this gear is very easy to get, right? You just have to do your faction missions, your PvP ones. You can join a group and do them if you need to. Realistically, the easiest ones to get it just real quickly is gonna be in Reekwater. Even the quests in Shadow Mountain are really easy. Shadow Mountain is actually way easier than everyone expects because the PP quest chains like over here, and when you actually do some of the quests, this is going to give you a safe spot. You can even actually just AFK in the same spot and get one of the quests done, and you're literally doing a PvP quest where nobody else can actually PvP on you. So just a quick tip, if Reekwater is too difficult in your zone to do PvP quests. But regardless, just get your faction gear however it is, right? When you talk about like gear that has dexterity and constitution, a lot of people go, oh, just stack constitution or stack dexterity. On your gear, it doesn't really matter, to be honest. Like you want the other perks to be good as long as it has a good amount of dex, and then there's a, yes, has whatever varying amount of constitution. It doesn't matter because at the end of the day, whatever your gear doesn't provide, you can change in this section, right? All you worry about is at the end of the day, when you wear all of your gear, and all the stuff, what you want to be at is you want to be at 300 dexterity, because then you get all this, and then there's like whatever diminishing returns past 300, right? And then you want to be at 110 constitution. I just have 2 points over. I think I changed one of my pieces, but this is what you want. The reason why you want to be at 110 constitution is so that way whenever you enter wars and stuff, what you can do is you eat the food buff that gives you 40 constitution, right? So it's going to be this roasted rabbit with seasoned veggies here. First Light doesn't have anything, but if you look at the other ones, right, it's going to give you 40 constitution for 40 minutes, which covers the entire duration of a war, for example. Wars can only last 30 minutes, right? And yeah, with that, you will have 300 dexterity and 150 constitution. So that is, I would say, the really easy point to hit, because you can see I'm only using faction gear here, and then there's a little bit of other stuff here, but this should be really easy to get for everybody to have 300 main stat and 150 constitution. I mean, this applies to realistically any single DPS build in the game. But yeah, as far as for the other gems, I mean, there's like 3 different gems you can have. There's like the gem I have right now, Diamond, which does a pretty even distribution of physical and elemental damage. There's ones that you can use that are more physical damage to Onyx, and I think Malachite is the one that does elemental, but it doesn't really matter which one of the 3. I just prefer the diamond ones because then all my gear looks the same. And then there's additional, these 3 sections, mines are not super upgraded, but one of the key things you do want to notice that like Your jewelry here for your neck is really going to be the one that actually has max health, so you want to try to get that if possible. Your ring actually has a bit more value because there can be a bit more offensive perks in here. I don't have that right now, but you can get thrust damage in your ring. You can get keen awareness, which is the crit increase specifically for the ring, I think. And then there's the jewelry here, which doesn't really matter as much, but essentially the perks that you want to get on your gear are going to be refreshing. It's still probably going to be one of the best ones because it's reducing all of your max cooldowns. That's why the PvP gear is still pretty good. Just letting you use your abilities more. And in general, your abilities are going to do a lot of damage. We'll get into that in a bit too. Resilient is still good, even though it's not bugged anymore, because one of the things is that you're so weak, you just don't want to get one shot, right? So right now, if the enemy person doesn't have crit damage, if they crit you, they'll actually do less damage, which you can say that's kind of like a funky math by Amazon, but it kind of can make sense because you're stacking a thing that reduces critical damage. So you're decentivizing people to crit you. But I think this gear is fine. This is just to prevent you from getting one shot. I mean, if a melee strength user gets on you in PvP and they're actually locking you down and they're at full HP, you've already lost that fight because you need to have been already killing them as they're running towards you, right? That being said, that's the gear. That's all the stuff. Don't worry too much about it. You can just start with faction gear, right? Even if your bow doesn't have runinous, really doesn't matter. The actual matter is going to be the gameplay, right? How do we make that work? And speaking of gameplay, we have to talk about the build first. So I'm only going to focus mainly on the bow because like I said, your other weapon doesn't really matter. We're staying the bow the main way. You're just getting flesh and you're going all the way down. You should make sure you get that. That's it. You're using your rapier to run away. All right, this tree, there I think are some slight differences you can make, but realistically, I don't think you actually should. I think the 3 abilities that I have here are actually the best 3 abilities you can have for a war setting, right? And I'll talk about all the passives too, but let's talk about the active abilities first. A penetrating shot. This is actually going to be your insanely big hitter. I wasn't sold as much on this first, but once you are able to better line up your penetrating shots, because it passes through targets, right? So the first shot shooting you do 150% weapon damage and it passes through targets and it continues for 100 meters. On top of that, if you pick the second talent, increase damage by 10% after each hit, max 50% damage. So you want to hit as many people as you can, and it's going to keep doing more damage the further it goes. And then deep strike, penetrating shot deals 20% more damage to targets 20 meters or more away. 20 meters or more is actually pretty far. So that's why I'm saying, like, with this build, you're really just going to be in super far away, as safe as you can while you're remaining at full HP and just picking people off. But when you're in a war and you fire this through like a clump of enemies, it does so much damage. Even in Outpost Rush, when Outpost Rush happens, everybody runs that middle point, right? And everybody's trying to fit into the doorway. Boom, shoot a penetrating shot through that doorway. Easy, like over 10k damage overall, probably like 15k damage, right? If you hit like 3 people, basically. Then the other one is Rapid Shot. I have seen other people not get this, but I think it's a bit troll if you don't get Rapid Shot in PvP, because in the current meta of PvP in general, you want to kill things fast and you want to burst them fast because healing actually heals people pretty quickly in this game. Right? Even with the resilient nerfs, whatever it is, you can get healed up pretty fast. Everybody has access to pots. So you want to essentially be bursting people down as fast as you can. And Rapid Shot, even though the first 2 arrows are still just doing 100% weapon damage, it fires them off very quickly. And then there's also, so the next talent here, if all 3 arrows hit the same target, the cooldown's reduced by 50%. Now, it's going to be pretty difficult for you to hit all 3 arrows on the same player. If you can, you basically kill them, unless they're a tank. If they're not a tank in the current version of the game, if you're hitting anybody in light armor with all 3 arrows, they are literally dead. So great job. Your aim is really crazy. But where this is really good is hitting Siege. Like I mentioned, Siege doesn't move. So you press the ability once, all 3 arrows are hitting the Siege, right? And you're getting your cooldown reduced by 50% after that. And then the third one, third shot deals extra damage. Great. And then this is the third shot is where the perk actually like benefits, right? Gives you additional armor penetration. Third ability, Rain of Arrows. This just complements your penetrating shot depending on how the enemies are kind of being grouped up. If they're grouping them in a circle or they're more like horizontally grouped up, your ring arrow is going to do a little bit better damage. But if they're kind of vertically, that's where your penetrating shot is going to be better for damage, right? But overall, 150 weapon damage, AoE, right? Don't forget, there's no target caps in this game. So like when your thing's actually AoEing, they're AoEing everything, right? And then the second one here, just an additional bleed. This is whatever. This is kind of like realistically damage padding, right? This is for padding. But when you look at your abilities too, and kind of just think a little bit, the Ring of Arrows actually has a cast time, or there's like a travel time that's further than both of these abilities. So one of the easiest ways in PvP you can just pick people off is you fire Ring of Arrows in the air and you immediately fire a penetrating shot through the crowd. You can actually kill a couple of people instantly if you get them both together and they both hit the same person. Now, that's all, I think, relatively easy. The active abilities, you can kind of read them, understand them, but the passes are really what is going to come in. And the biggest thing that the passes, once you really like think about them and pick the right ones, is you realize that when you're playing an arrow, you don't just like spam and you left click here. It's all about the actual heavy attacks, especially in PvP. So right, you hold down the left click, you wait until this thing is fully drawn, and then you fire the arrow. And you can kind of see that too when you hover over just the bow. Short draw, which is just when you spam left click, deals 100% thrust damage. Long draw, when you hold it, that's when it deals 170% thrust damage. So significantly more damage. That's how you're gonna get the one shots or the two taps. And that's also where a lot of these perks are gonna be buffing, right? But let's just go through this, the right side first, because there's gonna be more here. Let's start with this one, right? Heavy attacks, arrows fly faster and deal 30% more damage. So off the bat, you're already doing 170% thrust, and then you have this immediately. Heavy attacks are gonna fly faster, so it's gonna be a little bit easier to hit your targets, and 30% more damage. And then long range, like I mentioned, you wanna be far away, so if they're at least 10 meters away, you're gonna do 20% more damage. Here, this is just to help you kill enemies after the first shot. If they're below 50% HP, deal 20% more damage. Realistically, if you hit that heavy shot as the first attack, they, on a light armor target right now, they're gonna be below 50% HP. Next, opening strike. Heavy attacks deals 20% damage to foes with 100% health. More damage for heavy attacks. So, right, so you hit your first heavy attack when they're full HP, and then helps you bring them below. Another thing here, surprise attacks, which works very, very synergistically with open strike, because this one deals 20% damage to foes with 100% health. And this one, if you haven't damaged a foe in the last 10 seconds, deal 20% extra damage. So that's where you also have the even more value on that first shot. You really want to be hitting that first shot on a full HP target that you haven't damaged. Arrow range just reduces the start of gravity. Allows you to hit your arrows further, so helps you aim very good because you really want to be hitting headshots. Bullseye, bow critical chance increased by 10%. In case you don't hit headshots, helps you increase your crit. And concussion, when you land a headshot, you deal 20% more damage. Getting the arrow back is whatever, 20% more damage, right? We're all constantly thinking the same thing. How do we just add more damage to that one shot? Evasive tactics. After you dodge, deal 20% more damage buffs. Now this is good just for helping you get more damage, but actually in PvP, if you can constantly dodge, heavy draw, and then fire, and then keep dodging, it's going to be very difficult for the enemies to hit you, right? Being able to dodge and roll around so much and having that benefit you DPS wise is also going to be great for you too. Impale, I just have this here. There's not really anything else I would really want it, to be honest. I just pick Impale. If I hit a foe with 100% health, they just get slowed. That way my second hit can hit faster, but realistically the bow doesn't have crazy CC like some of the other ones. Even like this one, for example, it only does a 15% slow. I mean, the Ice Gauntlet can literally root you in place, right? The Great Axe can vortex you there, so CC on the bow is not the craziest. I mean, there's this, but still only a 10% slow. And then there's Dodge and Weave, which I just get because one, helps you travel really, really fast, and it's actually really good for farming purposes. So the thing that you want to know is that when you dodge and you come up, you guys see that animation that comes after you dodge, right? If you don't know it yet, but when you sheath your weapons back and forth, no matter if you put it in or put it up by pressing X, it actually cancels the dodge animation. So you dodge and you sheath your weapons, dodge or unsheath it. It actually does increase your speed. So every time you dodge, you want to be sheathing and sheathing your weapons. But do know that it does get a little bit funky when you're doing this in the middle of combat, because sometimes if it puts your weapon away, like if it puts it away, you can't right click anymore. So just be aware of that when you're dodging and sheathing your weapons at the same time. And also, the whole dodging while attacking works very, very well with the 300 dexterity trait, which is guaranteed critical hit after a dodge roll, can only trigger once every 10 seconds. You're literally dodging all the time anyways, and if somehow you don't hit a headshot, guess what? You're also critting. This also gives the ability to just use the other abilities after dodge, right? So like if you can use your penetrating shot as a first shot, that's actually still pretty good. And then there's all these other perks that just get increased headshot damage, right? Everything just increases damage. Same thing. You want to hit your shots on the bow. The other thing for gear that I forgot to mention is that you do want to wear light armor. The way that you do light armor is you wear all light armor, but your chest is medium. That's just a good distribution of gear. So you're at like the maximum you can be while still remaining light armor. Yes, you don't actually get 20% damage because the way damage calculates in this game, it's more like 7 to 8% damage. But regardless, it's still more damage, and your goal isn't really to get hit. If you're getting hit as a bow, well, that means the enemy actually is paying attention, and you should actually just dodge your abilities. But you should be wearing light armor as a bow user, right? You're not really taking that much damage. If you're taking damage, position better, right? Just position in a way where the enemy, if they're fighting you, they can only hit one guy, right? Don't stand with the group unless you need to be on a point because you're about to win, right? As the bow, you want to stand in a way where if the enemy is actually trying to hit you, they can only hit you, and they're not able to AoE other people around you at the same time. Like make it really, really not worth the time to try to even kill you. Just quickly going over the rotations really quick and stuff, right? So generally what you want to do, you want to have your bow out, right? You just dodge, you draw your weapon, hold left click and fire. That you want to be hitting headshot. And then of course, you always want to make sure you keep this buff up, right? This is the damage increase by 20% after your roll. So the entire time while you're playing, you always want to have that up. And then after you fire, generally after you fire with like one heavy shot, you want to follow it up with, one of these, the triple shots or even the penetrating shot. But the other combo is the big AoE combo, right? Where you do the rain of arrows here and then you do the penetrating shot. So you do this and you fire that one right in the middle, and it can have a really, really quick way of just completely deleting any other backline at the moment. But yeah, that's it just for discussing this, gearing aspect and how you want to have your character. Let's get into the more of the gameplay, because the whole point of this guide is you don't need crazy gear to do this, right? You just need to actually have the right talent points in, all of your skill masteries in, and then just position yourself in a way where you can do as much damage as possible. All right, so here is our most recent war here. This is the first light war. We've actually been doing a lot of work so far on this server. I mean, when I first joined this server, I switched servers to the El Dorado server. They had literally one syndicate faction. This is actually the 5th one that we are now taking very shortly after. So first things first, I think our group is split into like 3 different teams. We're just scouting out how many people are here, dropping some AoEs here, right? There's a ring of arrows, there's a penetrating shot, shoot that into the crowd, get a little bit of damage buff boost there. But we're kind of pushing back because they have way more people at this point than we do. In general, it's going to be pretty difficult for defense to have the same number of people in each base immediately off the bat, right? Because they don't understand, they don't know how many people you're planning on attack, right? That's the biggest advantage for attack, right? In general, wars are heavy catered or favored towards defense, right? But the one area I would say where offense has an advantage is in the very beginning. The defense doesn't know exactly how many people you're going to send into each base. They haven't split out their teams as well. And as the overall metagame gets better, I think people understand. So right here's the ring of arrows right in the middle of all the people that are dead. Far the triple shot, right? Penetrating shot through. I see 3 people together. If I ever see 3 people in a crowd together, penetrating shot through that all day, every day. Right? We're actually clearing these guys up real quick. I'm just checking to see if there's anybody on the actual gunner there. I don't think there is. Don't know why I kept firing into it, but hey, nobody else is. We're basically capping this base very, very freely. Finish that guy. See these 2 guys Here, these guys are going to be kind of backing out because we're actually capturing this first point real quick. Just constantly trying to fire arrows, trying to make sure I aim at a relatively good head height, just to make sure that I can get those headshots in. But yeah, I don't even know why they're coming over, to be honest, because, oh no, the point hasn't been lost yet. They're trying to reinforce it, but we're gonna wipe them out here pretty quick. And what was that? 5.5K, I think, right there on that shot right there on that guy on the left. You know, you're going to be doing really, really high damage. Even if you are still more resilient, even the crit is still there. Guys, bows, when you actually hit the shots, it does some damage, okay? Yeah, and this is the other thing, is that like, the other thing that's really good about the bow is the smaller skirmishes. So like your outpost rush is going to be great. Your wars, when you're split off in the smaller team, also going to be really, really great. Because right here you guys see, now that we've captured both points A and C, all 100 people are now fighting over point B. There's going to be desyncs, right? Look, right now when I'm looking at the top where I'm aiming right now, those guys are all desynced. They're not all just standing there not doing anything. It's just desynced. At this point, it becomes much, much harder to play bow. So I gotta try to find areas where like they're not desynced on my screen, try to fire into them. Or if I know that there's a group of 4 people running around, you're almost kind of hoping, just fire into the 4 of them, hoping that it hits somebody. But of course, trying to make sure you're firing at the headshot level if possible. And this is, you know, me doing damage with, I'm not good at FPS, right? So right there, the only time I pull out my Rapier, guess what? I'm using the dash ability to reposition myself, right? Position myself in a way where I'm not the first target for enemies to hit. If they want to hit me, it's really inefficient. I mean, those 2 guys don't want to even bother with me. I don't know why the guy just walked right past me, but hey, I'll pick them off from the back, no problem here. Fire that triple arrow into like 4 people. I hit like 1 guy, but the penetrating arrow hits. It's all good. Just constantly trying to. This is the other thing with the current meta now, with the changes to resilient. It's very, very hard for people to just like group up and clump on the point, especially if your team is actively losing the current fight, right? So they can't really be on there anymore. So if there's any like single melee that straggles in, just throw a couple arrows in them. They've got to get out. Very quickly capture this point. The thing is, on attack, if you're winning, you can snowball really, really hard. And the other thing is, you also want to be focusing on just killing people. You want to get them on the timers, right? Because one of the best things for defense is they can spawn in any base you haven't captured yet. So if all you're worried about is like stacking on the point, that doesn't fly anymore. So right here, I'm doing a mixture of trying to destroy the gate and the players, right? Whenever I have my triple shot up, you guys saw, spam into the gate, because I know all 3 arrows are hitting the gate. I'm going to get that reduced cooldown, right? Fire some penetrating arrows, some, you know, another triple shot into the gate, reduce cooldowns, fire a ring of arrows onto any melees that are standing at the door for some reason still. And then I think occasionally I'll like look up, try to pick off some of the range, but if it looks like the gate's going to be dead soon, I'm just going to continue to fire this into the gate. The other thing is, don't forget, your penetrating shot, when it passes through players, it keeps getting more damage, right? Really, really good for killing the gates too, because your arrows will pass through your players, and then it will hit the gate for even more damage. And then of course, in a war environment, if you're playing the bow and you see anybody on a siege weapon, aim at them. I mean, they can't dodge, as long as you can actually hit the guy on the siege, right? They're gonna have to get off the siege. Or nowadays, with how much damage you're doing, they're gonna have to get off real quick. And then yeah, if you see anybody up there, try to aim at them, get them off. But the first things first, when these gates also first open, right? Basically, as a bow, you really don't want to walk in until everybody else goes in, right? You guys can see, like, I'm kind of the last people in. Once again, I don't want to take damage because I want my HP to be full, right? I'm just here picking off guys. Now it's actually even more viable to just pick off melee because they're not that tanking anymore. So just kill them if needed. Whenever I see good clumps of people, always want to be firing your arrows into those, right? Your great axe users, whenever you see the great axe little suction in, just throw all your shit in there. It's gonna hit somebody, don't worry. And a little bit desync, but still somehow hit the guy. Is he AFK? Who knows at this point? But quickly step on the point, and yeah, there it is. Very, very fast win, but it's not about the speed of the win, but more so about like what is actually happening. Essentially, if there were more people coming on me, I would essentially switch to my rapier, dash away, and then switch back to my bow, use my mobility to kind of keep running away, rolling and, you know, sheathing and engineer weapons. It's very, very hard to catch a bow with a rapier when you're running away. So yeah, that's basically gonna be it. Hopefully this is helpful into insight into bow and how to play with the bow. Biggest thing is don't just hold right click and spam left clicks. You want to make sure you're charging up those bow hits. You want those hits to count, and you want them to hit big. And the better that you can burst your abilities together, the easier it is for you to actually kill things too. But yeah, thanks for checking that video, guys. Feel free to subscribe to see more. See ya.